What's up, guys? So today we're going to talk about why pressure kills clarity. And so one of the things what we talk about here with 7 to 8 figure founders, people that are scaling their business, entrepreneurs, CEOs, is oftentimes a red line. And so what we're going to talk about today is the nervous system, perception, and how dysregulation actually impedes your ability to scale, and it affects your ability to make good decisions. It actually stops you from being in a clear state and to create out of that state. Now let's talk about this. So there are two different parts of the nervous system. I'm sure you're familiar with this term, the nervous system, but did you know there are two sections? So let's unpack those. We first of all have the sympathetic state. Now, the sympathetic is fight or flight. So when you are in life or death situation, this part of the nervous system turns on to allow you to fight or run to survive. Now, think about this example I'm going to give you now. If you're running from a lion, it's the wrong time to throw in a cartwheel. Now, if you were to imagine yourself in that situation, you wouldn't see a lion and then say, oh, I'll do a cartwheel, because that's creative. What you would do is instinctive. You would just run, pick up a rock, and fight. One of those two things. So that aspect of the nervous system is wired to upregulate by shunting blood from the internal organs to the arms and legs so that you can run or fight. The opposite is true of the parasympathetic system. This is rest, digest, recovery. This is how we recover from the stress that we place our body on. So think of it as a polarity, or yin and yang. We do, then we recover. That's the nervous system. So the problem in the industries of scaling and business is that most of these people that are 7 to 8 figure founders, and I've seen this in the work I've done with some of these founders, is that they often redline. They stay in what we call a beta brainwave state, which is fight or flight, constantly outputting to try to meet the demands placed on them in their business. And so these people are naturally always consistently in the fight or flight state. They're consistently in sympathetic. And so the problem with this, going back to my example where I said if you're running from a lion, you wouldn't do a cartwheel. What happens is in stress, you do not problem solve. But most 7 to 8 figure founders try to problem solve under stress. They put themselves into positions where they are constantly having their back against the wall because it's common. Not because it's good, not because it's normal, but because it's common. And so because of that, they think, well, that's how everybody does it. And so their nervous system adapts to the stimulation placed on it. And so because of that, these 7 to 8 figure founders, CEOs, and so on are used to being in sympathetic fight or flight states. Now, you may think, well, what's wrong with that? You can do this, but as I always say, at what cost? Because you're not allowing the body to rebound into its recovery stage. And eventually, this burns you out. And like I said, the first problem here is when you are reactive, your decision-making skills are impeded. You see, the thing about this is that whenever you're under pressure, pressure distorts thinking. It actually distorts it because you cannot problem solve in that state. So remembering people like Tiger Woods, who was on the top of the world and he was the best golfer in the world, and then he had this infidelity charge placed against him. For the next 3, 4, 5 years, he couldn't be at his best because when you're in stress, you can't become creative. And in golf and any other sport, that's more about activating more of your right brain depending on the situation. And so that's just an example of someone who can't perform to their best because they are in a stressful or sympathetic state. And the problem I see with a lot of my clients that are 7 to 8 figure founders and building or trying to scale their business is they try to do these things through effort and force rather than regulation. So one of the things I always say, people always react to their internal programming. It's never the event, it's the personal program. So to give you another example of this, if two people on a roller coaster ride, one of them loves it, one of them hates it. Whilst they're on the roller coaster ride, it's not the roller coaster ride that's creating the problem. It's the person's programming, whether they like it or hate it. And this is based on their nervous system regulation. If this is something that you love, this is something that you're used to, this is something that you enjoy, then you'll be in a clarity in a form of relaxation, even though the event can be traumatic. Whereas the other person reacting to the event has a program based on stress patterns that reacts to increase in stress. And so they can't regulate themselves under that stress. So one of the goals here is, first of all, identify that you're in this brainwave state. So high pressure equals beta, but it's for how long? You see, there are 7 brainwave states. And just so I can clarify the understanding of brainwaves, brainwaves is how fast your brain is oscillating per second, and the rate at which you oscillate determines the state that you're in. So hear that again. The rate at which you oscillate determines the state you are in. And so if I were to go through these brainwave states from the lowest to the highest, even though there are 7, I'm actually only going to go through 5 because the other 2 are highly spiritual and many people can't attain them. So when we are in the lowest brainwave state of the normal 5, we are normally in delta. And delta itself is 0.5 to 3 hertz per second. This state allows us to relax, to recover, to dream, all of the things that allow the physiology of the body to recover from the trauma and the events of the day before. I'm sure you're all familiar with the understanding that if you don't go to sleep, if you don't dream for up to 5-7 days, you might actually have a lot of cognitive issues, and eventually if you don't sleep for more than something like 30 to 40 days, you could actually die. So that's because the body is in a sympathetic state for so long, there is no rebound. And so the best form of recovery we can gain is through sleep. And so delta is necessary for us to access the true benefits of sleep. So the next one up from that is theta. Theta is a typical state where if you were to go into hypnotic suggestion, that's the state you'd be in to allow that to happen. So it's deeply relaxing, it is deeply hypnotic. Some people call it hypnotic dreaming or hypno dreaming. Very advanced states of meditation where your body goes into such a tranquility are achieved in theta. Theta is 4 to 7 hertz. Again, oscillations per second for the brain. The next state up from that is what people call alpha. Alpha is from 8 to 12 hertz. This I always term as the gateway. It's the bridge between calm and relaxation and sleep and theta in hypnosis. And then the next wave above that, which is beta. So before I go to beta, alpha itself, as I said, is the gateway. But it's the state at which you are calm, deeply relaxed, and can allow your body to go into a state of recovery. For me, when I work with my clients, alpha is the most important brainwave state to occupy outside of the beta brainwave state to allow recovery in a awakening state in a normal day. And so the next one is beta. Beta is the state that most founders and CEOs operate in. This is from an incredible pace of 13 to 30. Remember, alpha is 8 to 12. Beta is 13 to 30. So when you get to the higher end of beta, your brain is oscillating rapidly. And that becomes familiar to most people. And when you're in this high beta state, oftentimes this is through pressure. Pressure itself raises the brainwave state into beta and then high beta. And when you're in this state, you create distortion. You can't think clearly because what you're trying to do is think under pressure. The brain does not allow that to happen at ease. We have to regulate and modulate the brain to be able to go from left brain to right brain. So now you've heard those terms before. So now sticking with beta, what would left and right brain be? Left brain would most likely be in beta, and right brain is more likely connected to alpha. When I say more likely, I mean most of the time you oscillate into the alpha brainwave state to access the right brain. That is where creativity comes in. So most children, I say most because a lot of children, well, certain children are under stress, but children in their natural state are creative. You see all of them painting, singing, dancing. All of those things are creative expressions that need the right brain, and that is alpha. So again, focusing on beta again, when you're in beta, you're in a state of urgency, you're in a state of heightened emotion, and also at this point, when you're in beta for too long, it creates poor decisions. Now, if you're making big deals that are millions upon millions of pounds or dollars, you don't want to be in beta, but unfortunately, most people adapt to what they're familiar with. And regardless of whether it's good or bad, your body adapts to normality. Now, to give you an example of that as well, the first time you see someone smoke a cigarette, they may cough and gag. Eventually, they'll get used to it. It's not good for you, but your body adapts. Whatever you perceive as normal, whatever you do consistently, is what your body adapts to. If you sit in bad postures all day long, your body adapts to that. If you train badly, your body adapts to that. Whatever your body is under in regards to stimulation, it will adapt to. Why? Because the brain and the body always seek the path of least resistance. So if it's easier to just adapt to the thing that you're doing, then it will. Okay, it's also known as the law of facilitation. So that's beta, and that's the state that I see most CEOs and founders in redline and then pushing themselves beyond normal levels because of urgency. The next brainwave state above that is what we call gamma. Gamma starts from 31 up to 100. And you may think, well, that's very fast. These are the states that people are in where you hear about women that pull a child out of a car by breaking the door off. They access gamma. This is the state where you see Olympic records broken. This is the state where you see people do things that most people believe as impossible. Maybe they just become impervious to pain, or they break the leg and they keep running. Those stages, they use adrenaline as well, yes, but they access a brainwave state where they're in such flow, they supersede their conditions of the body, they supersede environment, and then they're able to do things beyond what would be classed as normal human levels. So those are the typical 5 brainwave states. Like I said, there are 2 others, there's lambda and epsilon, but they go way beyond the scope of this video, and they're not in relative to what I want to talk about today with regards to productivity. So again, these CEOs and MDs, 7 to 8 figure founders, are operating in urgency. And when you operate in urgency without a rebound such as alpha, you will do things, but you'll eventually get to a point of fatigue and poor decision making. That may sound like you right now. You're pushing so many buttons that you're not holding everything in your life. You're actually just managing things. And managing things is tolerating and just finding ways around. But holding everything is in a state of bliss and absolute purpose, stability, and foundation where you're able to operate your business from a state of flow. And that's the goal here, is to operate your business from flow. So, like I said, one of the things that is affected by most of these people is decision making, inability to reflect. And when you can't do that, you can't see the wood for the trees, as they say. You are not able to analyze things with clarity because you're in a stressful state. So what do we need to do? How do we get through this? Well, the easiest way to get through this is to get into the alpha brainwave state. Again, the alpha is more like a reset point for your nervous system. It allows you to go in rest and recovery, as stated at the start of this video. And when you're in alpha, you get to a point of absolute clarity, and you can access alpha. It's not impossible. It doesn't take 15, 20 years of mastery. Research and studies have shown that the body can reset back to alpha brainwave state with only 3 to 5 minutes of correct stimulation. Now, what we're talking about here is nervous system regulation. So think of it like this. Alpha is nervous system regulation, which is what we call parasympathetic, recovery, clarity, creativity. Whereas beta is the opposite spectrum, and that is dysregulation, beta, sympathetic distortion. That's the state that most business people operate in. And you may say, yeah, but they do so well. They scale their businesses, they're making money, and all these things. Yes, they are. But always, I say, at what cost? the cost is always to themselves in terms of their health, their happiness, their sanity, and then also their relationships with their family, whether it's their wife, their husband, or their children. And I see this all the time. There are so many founders that I've seen that are scaling their business and they may be successful, but they are truly unfulfilled. And this is where we have to look at ourselves and think, what is the point of redlining? What is the point of conquering the world when there's no one to share it with? And when I say share it with, I don't mean you don't disperse that money to your employees or your family. I mean to be fully present with. If that sounds like you, then it's about time to, as Michael Jackson would say, take a look in the mirror and see that man or the woman in the mirror and decide, is this sustainable for me? And I guarantee you it's not. You can do it. You can push through. But this is where pressure starts to kill your clarity, because you'll be able to do things under pressure, but again, for how long and at what cost to your body. So that's where we need to gain clarity. And like I said, the easy way to do that is through the alpha alignment system, my system that I developed. Now, it doesn't have to be my system, but it has to be about accessing the alpha, the parasympathetic state. And so when you get to a point of regulation, when I say the regulation, I mean bringing the nervous system into alpha. When you can bring your nervous system into alpha, you build a business through state, not through effort. Gone are the days where we do this. This is not sustainable long term. We have to build the businesses through regulation and state, because when you're in that state, you can think clearer. The importance of making a powerful decision in a very short time supersede the effort of normality, of stress, and operating on the beta. So, whenever you do this, whenever you get into nervous system regulation, you think slower. And you may think, I don't want to think slow. But when I say slower, I mean clearly. There's no pressure in the thought. It literally comes to you. How many of you have been in that point where you're talking to someone, it's got nothing to do with business, and you're just bringing words through you, almost like you're a vessel, and the information comes through you, and you're like, wow, that's a great idea. Or how many of you business leaders and CEOs stress over trying to make the right decision? You break your head against the wall, as they say, or bang your head against the wall, and the decision can't come to you no matter how hard you try. And then you go home, you spend time with your children, and the decision just pops into your head. Why? Because it wasn't about effort. It was about surrender. It was about letting go. It was about being in peace, being in stillness, operating in alpha. What if you could do that every single day? What if every single day you could be productive in beta and then exit beta intentionally and move into alpha to create a decision, to get clarity, and then to scale from that clarity? That's what happens when you're in alpha. And that's why it's important to diagnose this. And this is the difference between coaching and architecture. And so what I'm talking about here is the ability to be able to diagnose what the body's saying rather than what the brain is saying. Because what I witness is so many operators, so many business leaders, what they do is they think from their brain, but they don't feel from their body. And if you understand the systems of the body, we have the brain, which oscillates at about 8 hertz when it's balanced. And then the heart rate and the respiratory rate operate around 60 when it's balanced, and around the respiratory rate of 6 to 10 when it's balanced. When those synchronize with the peristaltic wave, which is the contract, relax of the colon, those are classed as the 3 biological operating systems or biological oscillators. When they are synchronized, the body is in harmony. So what I'm saying here is, if you slow your mind down, you get to a regulated state, you're actually in harmony with your body. And when you can think and feel in collaboration, you make better decisions with more clarity and more purpose from ease and flow. That is nervous system regulation. That is what I call the alpha alignment. And so now it's not about ignoring the body and thinking from the brain. It's about connecting what we call the heart brain connection points, and then building your business with so much ease and flow that your effort is no longer needed. You can put your effort into other things such as working out at the gym and allow your flow to delegate itself through you without stress, making decisions that are actually faster because you slowed down to allow that information through the body in a regulated state. And that doesn't sound like the way to build a business. And so hopefully that makes sense to you. You understand that when you have pressure, it forces you into a decision-making situation that you may regret. But when we can alleviate that pressure by regulating the nervous system, you can make better decisions. Now you may finally ask, well, how do I alleviate pressure? Well, like I said at the start, it's about normalizing the default for your body, and this is alpha. How do I get into alpha? I suggest that every 2 or 3 hours, you do something while you're at work that allows you to initiate the alpha brainwave state for 5 minutes. That's what you get your body into, regulation. And then you can continue your business day, and every 2-3 hours, 5 minutes in alpha. And the ways that you can get into alpha: breath work. Just do something like box breathing. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold for 4 seconds in each of those intervals. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4, and do 3 to 5 cycles of that. That creates a rhythm. When you create rhythms for the body, it normalizes and synchronizes those biological oscillators I mentioned, bringing you into what we call the alpha brainwave state. You can go for a walk. You can do toning exercises. You can stretch. You can do rebounding exercises. All of these things stimulate the parasympathetic system, allowing you to get into the alpha brainwave state. And when you operate in alpha, clarity comes without force. Decision making increases, and then scaling is simpler. So what you understand here is it's about time that we regulate the nervous system so that we can scale our businesses from state rather than sheer effort. Once you can do that, you scale so much faster. This is the alpha alignment work. And this is what I do. And if you're interested in going deeper, if you want to actually test yourself and say, well, I actually don't know what brainwave state I'm operating in. I actually don't know if I'm in the alpha or beta. I don't know if I'm stressed or not. I can feel it, but I'm not sure. Well, the leadership diagnostic quiz is attached to this video. You can click the link. It will take you to a page where you can take a 90-second quiz. And that will let you know, based on the end of the interpretation, where you fit in on that scale. And once you have a look at that and you think, okay, you know what? I am in this state of regulation or lack of regulation. Then you can go further and you can get a full diagnosis. Once you have that full diagnosis, then the next step is if you want to work with me and go deeper and actually learn how to override this, which is how I use my personalized database for every single one of my clients. I use 18 different biometrics from blood oxygen levels, heart rate variability, blood pressure, brainwave states, movement, hydration, and all these sort of things with all of my one-to-one clients. And biometrics themselves give you data daily, not monthly, daily. And every 30 days within our coaching, we actually go into all the things that are going on at a physiological level. It's not what you think, it's what the body projects back to you as truth. And once you know that, then you can actually operate and always negotiate and navigate those roadblocks because they're feedback. And that diagnostic blends in with the awareness to actually allow you to execute at a high level. All right, guys, you've been great. If you like it, please share and please subscribe. Until next time, take the test, take the quiz, and I'll see you in the next video. Much love.